Hey there. If anybody's actually, been waiting for this video, sorry. Just me getting busy, taking forever. Anyways, here we go. Jaguars 2020 this season. But last season, the Jaguars went 6 and 10. Um it's just weird getting back into the flow of this. Honestly, I barely got to watch any Jags games at all last year. I think I watched I think the week 3 game was the Thursday night game where they played the Titans. And that game was pretty fun to watch. Got to see Gardner for the first time. But not a lot. I didn't get to see a lot of them. So I mean, I barely even checked out that game I did, but checked out I'm talking about their uniforms. I barely even got to check out their uniforms before, so I mean their uniforms look nice. I know they aren't even new this year, but I just like it. Uh wow, first thing of note from last season's notes. DJ Chark gets very, very open. He'd have some plays where it was just like, wow. Um it's just he's it was like me looking at Jerry Judy in the draft this year. It was just like, man, it's like this guy's so talented, but it's like half the time he can't even show his ability to make plays on the football with defenders near him because he does the first aspect of the receiving game, the route running, so well. So he gets really open, and even further into the year, he had some nice grabs too. Um, Leonard Fournette, I don't think Leonard Fournette is that special, to be honest. I mean, a lot of the runs I saw last year, if he was breaking it, it had to do with a lot of the blocking. So I don't know how much. I mean, with how high of a pick he is, you're gonna, unless they trade him soon. I mean, you're gonna see him for a while, but uh, I don't know if he's really anything too special for what the value was that they had to put on him. Minshew shows flashes and has amazing pocket maneuverability. Especially the first play I saw on display was against the Broncos, and it was just like, wow, that it really is amazing. And really, I think that's a trait of quarterbacks that usually tend to have a lot of success. Because if you can make your offensive line look good, it makes you look even better. Finding the lanes, like say, oh, this guy's coming off the edge hard with like a speed rush type move, and you're able to step up, get into that throwing window, and make a nice accurate throw. It's so important, and Minshew does that very well. AJ Boye still locking things up. He had some nice plays last year. Just obviously, when talking about their cornerback situation, you just have to be like, yeah, but they don't have Ramsey anymore. But they got two cornerbacks in the draft this year that look all right, in my opinion. I love Josh Allen. Josh Allen, pass rusher, not the quarterback for my Buffalo Bills. Um, he was my favorite player in the draft last year, and I was so sad when the Jaguars got him before the Bills could have gotten him. But they got my favorite player in the draft that year, and he actually, since I wasn't paying much attention to the Jaguars last season, I found out based off doing the research for this that he really actually did still have a very successful season, even though um, there was no, there wasn't really much of a mention of it. Um, Miles Jack ends up with the football in one play and he laterals it backwards when there's no need to lateral it at all, and he ends up getting an illegal forward pass. So actually, it wasn't backwards, but it was just a pretty funny play considering I'm pretty sure he's the one who used to play running back in either high school or got like snaps carrying the football at UCLA or something, and yet he's lateraling the ball when he forces a turnover. That's funny. Ronnie Harrison jumped some routes last season, looked good. I didn't know much about him. Saw him make a few plays. Chris Conley, at around the Bengals game in the season, was able to really start coming on hot, and his success was, uh, well, I mean, it didn't help him too much, 6 and 10 as we know, but it was they got a good safety there in him. I'm pretty confident in his abilities. I can't say too confident because it wasn't major flashes, but there were a few flashes. Um, there's a play. There's a play where Gardner Minshew shakes off a Jamal Adams sack, and it's just absolutely beautiful. Um, Actually, it may have not been a sack. He may have been past the line of scrimmage. I don't know. I can't remember correctly. Sorry about that. DJ Chark is dominant. Just another note about DJ Chark, because it's the further and further I get into this stuff. If I mention a player twice in my notes, it means that they were really balling. And straight up, DJ Chark rated way too low for a receiver in this league, because he was making all sorts of different kind of plays. Uh, Ngakwe had a lot of production to potentially not even play for the team this year. So he's still a good player, but if you're a Jaguars fan, you're going to want to hope that he's actually playing. Trey Herndon, another secondary guy, had a good year. Chark, now this is where I started talking about the receiving core even more. Chark was very successful throughout the entire year. As I said, I think he's dominant. It was awesome to find out how great of a player he is looking at this stuff. Conley sort of started picking his game up halfway through the season and kept it going through. And then by the end of the year, it was like Keelan Cole was getting on sort of a streak there too. So the three of them combined, if they can keep up that level, actually create a pretty good receiving core. Now the question is, can they actually continue that success in the receiving game? And Minshew, I was very pleased with Minshew for where they got him. I mean, very impressed with his ability. So, next note, Logan Cook, their punter, completed 2 fake passes for first downs too. That was great. I loved it. Why can't more teams fake things? Fake field goals, fake punts, whatever. I mean, throw the other team off. Don't be so boring. This was bad. The Jaguars as a team last season ran for 3 touchdowns and allowed 23 rushing touchdowns. That's not a stat I would usually bring up, but that's just miserable when it shows how they got pushed around and bullied, basically. Josh Lambo had a great year, though. Only missed 2 kicks, field goals, or PATs. That was awesome. They got their kicker situation filled out. And, honestly, let me think about their team. Yeah, I think Lambo is the best at his position on their team, which is pretty funny to say. But then you got Josh Allen, had 10.5 sacks last year, awesome. Ngakwe and Calais Campbell both had less than him, so that just shows Josh Allen's talent level, in my opinion. Then here was one of the stats that really shows the weakness in the run game. Jared Wilson and Ronnie Harrison led the team in tackles. That's not good. You don't want 2 secondary players leading the team in tackles. That's just miserable. Ngakwe, then Allen, then Campbell for tackles for loss. All 3 of those players had double-digit TFLs. Calais Campbell obviously gone, so I don't know, but Ngakwe and Allen were in front of him, and if Ngakwe plays this season for him, then that production's pretty good. But the sad part about that TFL stat right next to the tackle stat is that it was like, okay, our defensive line's playing pretty well. But basically, if the running back reaches the linebacker level of the defense, nobody's stopping him for the next 15 to 20 yards. So that hurts. The linebacker position looks pretty iffy. But I do have to say that the off-season additions really made a lot of sense for what they were struggling with. Let's talk about injuries from last season then. Nick Foles, I think this wasn't a bad thing for the organization. I can't say that enough. To move to, I'm talking about the injury aspect of it. Nick Foles getting hurt, obviously, is a bad thing. We don't want to see any players get hurt. But I think with him getting injured, showing us the potential of Gardner Minshew, showing us that he could be an NFL quarterback. Can't say confirmed yet, but could be a good NFL quarterback. It's pretty important to know that is a possibility. So now with that information, they know that they move on from Nick Foles, and we'll see what Gardner Minshew can do this season. 2 other guys that were of note, Alfred Blue, name over game. I don't know if he's done anything recently, but I know the name, so I figured, hey, I'll throw him on. He could have helped their run game potentially because it was really only Fournette and they had a guy. Their second running back was catching a ton of passes, but not really running the ball too well. And his name is slipping by me now, but I think Alfred Blue would have helped them in the actual running aspect of the running game, not the other second RB who was just mostly a receiving back. And then the third injury that I thought was really mentionable is James O'Shaughnessy. When he was playing, he was playing well. He was getting so many targets. He scored some touchdowns. I mean, he was playing well. I thought that was a big loss for him. Once he got hurt, it was almost like, where'd this guy go? Because I look at the games and then afterwards I check the injuries. But I saw the injury report and I was like, yeah, that makes sense because he was a big player for them in the first half of the season and that slowed down their offense. Okay, here's some players they signed in the offseason. First player, Mike Glennon. Mike Glennon is coming in to be a backup behind Gardner Minshew. I think that's nearly obvious. It feels like Mike Glennon's just been around forever, and it feels like he's also a massive human being, like 6'8" or something. He's tall, I just don't know how tall. But anyways, he's coming in to be the backup. He's basically just replacing Nick Foles. Gardner's the starter. Since Nick is gone, Mike Glennon is now the backup. It's a good signing. You want a named backup quarterback. A named backup quarterback will always make you feel much better than when you walk into a game and the backup quarterback is now the starting quarterback and no one's ever heard of him. I think my favorite example is when my Buffalo Bills started a guy in 2014 by the name of Jeff Toole. And some people will appreciate that, but game didn't end too well. We almost pulled out a big win that week with a really unknown quarterback, but if we had a known quarterback, it may have went even better. Then, here we go. This is why it gets good. Aaron Lynch, linebacker, or edge player maybe, somewhere. I haven't caught up with him recently, so I don't even know. I really haven't followed him much ever, so he's either a linebacker or edge player type. That's what we want. Chris Thompson, another receiving back, basically. Raquel Armstead, that's his name. Raquel or Raquel, one of the two. But Chris Thompson is another receiving back to come in here. If he has more production than Armstead, I'm sure Armstead, he may not have a job if Chris Thompson can take that spot from him. But they may keep something like 4 running backs on roster, so maybe with that thought, they will. They bring in Tyler Eifert at tight end. I'm interested to see what he does. Hopefully they're going to use 2 tight ends, though, because O'Shaughnessy should be coming back, and he had a good year last year. I would like O'Shaughnessy to actually be in front of Eifert, but I guess they'll see how everybody's performing and whatever. Rashawn Melvin comes in at corner. That's helpful because he's kind of a middle-of-the-road type of guy, never anything too crazy, but I don't think he's ever been bad for anybody. So he'll come in and do some stuff potentially, but then you look at the draft and it's like he may not get on the field. So Al Woods, he's going to be a D lineman to replace. They're going to have to move some D linemen around, figure stuff out with that. But with Calais Campbell being gone, I'm sure they'll figure it out. We got other guys on here. A few more mentional names here. Cassius Marsh, Lorente McRae, Rodney Gunter. They're all noteworthy players, but I don't really have specifics on any of them that I want to point out. But the last guy on the signed list that is huge, Joe Schobert may be, in my opinion, one of the most underrated linebackers in the game. If you have watched him play recently, he's on another level. He's reading plays and diagnosing them and seemingly making so many tackles all the time. When they signed him, I was like, that's a huge signing. And that was before I even knew about their problems in the run game. He is so important to help their team next season that it's ridiculous. However, sadly, even though I do think they had the right idea here, and in what's it called? Trying to fix the issue, which was allowing so many yards on the ground, and especially the linebackers being so lackluster. That's huge. And now that I'm getting to the lost players, I'm seeing that we have Calais Campbell, obviously traded to Baltimore. And even though I said it earlier, I completely forgot to mention AJ Boye is now on the Broncos. So, actually, yeah, Rashawn Melvin will definitely be playing next season because somehow things can slip my mind, and AJ Boye is gone, one of the best players on the team. Also, Nick Foles gone, but obviously we have Gardner Minshew, and Marquise Lee is now off the team. He was recently released, but I don't see that one being huge as he wasn't even one of the top 3 receivers I mentioned before. And Ngakwe, I put under the lost list because he's on the roster for now, but he seemingly doesn't want to be on the team. That's pretty tough. I mean, I don't know what's going to be up with him when the season actually rolls around, but it's really weird. So now let's talk about their draft because we got to look at who they got. First pick, C.J. Henderson, cornerback. I just want to point out how stupid I am about the A.J. Boye thing again. But, so now we got C.J. Henderson and Rashawn Melvin potentially as our 2 starting corners. Other guys that were already in the secondary last year, I can't even remember who was playing safety and who was playing corner. But it seemed like they had some pretty good, I think, because Jared Wilson and Ronnie Harrison are the safeties. I think the only corner, if he was a corner, I'm pretty sure he was playing corner last season, is Trey Herndon. So I think he potentially still has a spot, but they got a lot of cornerback talent that they loaded up on in the offseason to take a job. C.J. Henderson, well-versed zone corner, looks like a good player. They also had a ridiculous amount of draft picks that I had to go through. I think it was 13 total. And then next, Kayvon Chason is an edge player and out of LSU. Now this was the pick that made me almost so happy for the Jaguars because I was sitting there watching the draft and I'm just thinking, they got Josh Allen last year, and now they get my favorite player in the draft this year, Kayvon Chason. So that's 2 years in a row they get my favorite player in the draft, and literally all I wrote about him is he is relentless. He's just great. I love how he plays the game. I would have drafted him so much earlier than the spot they got him at. I think they got a great player for that pick. Next pick, they had Laviska Shenault Jr., wide receiver. I didn't like him as much pre-draft, but since I rewatched him for this video, he's okay, but I don't love the pick here because the receiver room doesn't feel like it's lacking that much. I mean, I feel like there's some other positions that could go to help, but I don't know. It's kind of a pretty weak roster all over the place. It's kind of like, next they go Devon Hamilton, defensive tackle. He's a pure bulldozer at defensive tackle. He'll push the pile in your favor. That's what I got about him. Ben Barch, he's a guard. He's actually a tackle. He's going to be a guard at the NFL level. And I don't know. He seems like he's a good player, but we'll just have to watch the transition and see how it goes. That's something. Next guy to talk about, Josiah Scott is a cornerback. He's a solid man-to-man corner. And every once in a while, because it seemed like they had him in a lot of press coverage, it'll look like he gets beat deep, but he'll just barely be under the route and perfectly swat the ball down. I mean, every single time it seems like he's in perfect positioning. And honestly, I don't know what type of like zone or man scheme the Jags are planning on running next season, but with how I said with last season, at the beginning at least, Ramsey and Boye to start the year. You look at that and you say, oh, they're probably manning people up because it's like that's the talent they've got. You want to use what you've got for talent. But then this year you go first pick and I'm like, C.J. Henderson's more of a zone corner in my opinion. At least that seems where he was making the most plays. And then this guy, Josiah Scott, is playing excellent man-to-man coverage. And I'm not as sure about like Rashawn Melvin or anything. think Rashawn Melvin may actually be more like a slot guy. So if they go nickel set, you'll have Henderson one side who's more of a zone guy, Scott potentially on the other side as a man guy, and then in the nickel, Rashawn Melvin in there. It's just, I'm not sure what scheme they're going for. If they go for a balanced zone, some like even split, like 50% zone, 50% man, or 60-40 or something fairly even, I guess it makes sense, but it doesn't seem like they're headed in one specific direction, which is kind of questionable. Next, pick a guy by the name of Shaquille Quarterman, linebacker. He really seemed like what I would expect out of a linebacker. He's pretty basic. He's really what he's got to his name at the college level is a lot of tackles, and that's seemingly it. So it's important to get some tackles, but I mean, I'm looking at him and I'm like, I don't know what this guy's gonna add that is that crazy. Although all the linebackers last year for the Jaguars did absolutely nothing. So if he comes onto the field and he's a tackling machine, it may be good. Next, Daniel Thomas, a safety. He's an awesome player. I love him. He's a I'll run through a brick wall for you player, and his style of play is very downhill, while his instincts are amazing too. And then once he sees something in front of him, he reacts to it so well. And once again, that's like one of the players that I see, and I'm like, wow. Once I watch him, I'm like, my eyes are lighting up. Like, why is this guy still available at this pick? Colin Johnson for a receiver. He's got good feet. Routes seem crisp and fairly impressive catches, but I didn't see any receptions that made my jaw completely drop to the floor. So it seems okay. Once again, very deep draft class at receivers, so I don't know. I think a lot of the guys after the first round, I'm really confused on where they should have went. So that was just kind of like all over the place. Got a quarterback next, Jake Luton. His receivers were open a lot and not many tight windows throws. It was hard to judge how his reads were. I mean, he's probably the third string quarterback, if not cut potentially. I don't think I'm going to put a lot of stock into Jake Luton. Tyler Davis, he looks like a Kittle. He's a tight end. He was at UConn for, I think, the first 3 years of college and then transferred to Georgia Tech, which was strange. I could find a lot of stuff from him at UConn, but seemingly at Georgia Tech last season, he had a pretty bad year. And so that drop-off was sad to see, but he really was a good receiving tight end at UConn, so you could have something there, just some Georgia Tech lackluster taking advantage of what they had. But yeah, I don't know why his production had such a drop off last year. It was bad. It wasn't good. Wasn't good to see at all. And then their last player they drafted, which since they had 100 guys drafted, sorry this took forever. Chris Claybrooks had a great championship game in his last game of college football, and he returned a kick for a touchdown in college, which, according to a study, means that if you return a kickoff for a touchdown in college, you are like, I don't know what the actual number was, but it almost exponentially increases the odds of you being successful in the NFL, which means this guy, as an NFL player, could be a good corner, and we'll have to see about him. Don't really know, but they got a lot of corners to try to fill out the Ramsey and Boye losses, but we'll see how that goes. And the one last thing I want to mention about Claybrooks is watched an interview with him, and he had his son. He is 22 years old, and I looked at his son, and his son looks like somewhere between like 8 and 10 years old, and I'm like, geez, how old was this guy when he had a kid? Like 14? Not knocking him for it, but I mean, it was crazy to see a 22-year-old with such a grown-looking kid. I was just like, wow, I'm 18. Holy cow. Yeah. But with all that said, now I have to go through their opponents and say what I think their win-loss record will be next season. The thing here is that I really have to think about I know I talk about their additions, um, like the linebackers and the corners, and they're filling a lot of holes they need to fill. But I mean, even though they're filling like their worst holes, the overall roster is one. I hate this excuse. Absolutely hate this excuse, but I got to bring it up because of them drafting 13 rookies and potentially them all being on the team. And then that's not even counting undrafted free agents. 13 rookies, that's a young team. That's a very young team. Your quarterback's in his second year. I mean your veteran some of your veteran guys want to leave the team. That's just hard. That's hard. Calais is gone. Ramsey's gone. Boye is gone. Ngakwe is potentially leaving, and he hasn't even been in the league that long. It's tough for them. But the lack I do have to praise them for the moves they made. I agree with a ton of the moves they made. So that's a good thing. But the roster is still very lacking in other aspects. So it's a big thing to point out. First thing we'll talk about, divisional opponents, okay? We've got the Titans, Texans, and Colts. Twice a year for each of them. All of those teams, it's very simple to say this. All those teams have more talent than the Jaguars have, sadly. Divisional games, though? So to start, I will say they're going to drop 5 games into the division, which starts them with a 1-5 record. Then, their home games left are against Pittsburgh, Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, and Miami. I don't like their odds in most of these games either. Pittsburgh, gonna way improve. If they have Roethlisberger, I'm liking Pittsburgh a lot, and that's 1-6. Chicago, I don't love their quarterback situation because it's either Trubisky or a new Nick Foles, and that offense does not have a ton of talent for whoever the quarterback is in that building. So I can give them a game against the Bears. That'll put them up to 2-6. Then they'll play the Lions. If the Lions have Stafford is a game changer. He's such a good player, honestly. He wills that teams to victory all the time, even though no one else on the team wants to win. So I'm saying they're probably going to lose to the Lions. Then I'm thinking the Browns are going to be a lot better too. So we're at 2-7 now. I think the Browns are going to be a lot better now that Freddie Kitchens isn't in charge. I mean, just watching. Well, I recently watched a whole Browns game back, and there's so much talent there that's just terribly utilized. They're probably going to lose to the Browns too, and losing to the Browns puts them at 2-8. So last home game we got to go over is against Miami. I think Miami's a toss-up game. I don't see as many toss-up games in the away game category, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'll give them a game against Miami to put them at 3-8. I think Miami is actually a better team than them, but if Jacksonville's got some home field advantage, maybe that's a little bit of a swing there. 3-8 now. Oh boy, this is not going to be fun for them though. They got to go to Baltimore. Sorry. Baltimore went 14-2 last year. They don't lose to this type of team. I'm very sorry, Jaguars fans, but they're not going to lose to this team, and there's not going to be any special thing where you get revenge on Calais Campbell for leaving. Or I don't know if there's any bad vibes there at all, but I don't think so. So 3-9, 3-9 with 4 games left. That probably puts you out of the playoffs. I mean, pretty much guaranteed. You got the Packers, you got the Vikings. In both of those territories, I think you're losing both of those too. 3-11. Then 2 games left. Bengals, Chargers. I think both of those teams are improved from last season. Just to be nice, I'll say you get one of those two because I don't want to say you're going 3-13, but I'll give you a 4-12. I think a 4-12 is okay to expect from this team. I like a lot of pieces they added this offseason, but sadly, I just don't think that's going to be enough. yeah, 4-12 for the Jaguars. So, if you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching.
2020 president candidate.